In this video, I'm going to share how you could use the MiSlope One-Piece Dartless Sloper to create this bralette design. Tanya here from MiSlope.com, where our mission is to make fashion design accessible to everyone and help you make money from your sewing business by bringing your creative vision to life in less time. In this tutorial, you're going to learn how to draft this bralette design for stretch fabric using the MiSlope One-Piece Dartless Sloper. You're going to need a couple things for this tutorial. The first being the MiSlope One-Piece Dartless Sloper. Second, you're going to need a vector graphics software. Today I will be using Adobe Illustrator, but you could follow along with CoralDraw or Inkscape or any other type of vector graphics software. CoralDraw and Adobe Illustrator both have free trials that you can sign up for and follow along. And Inkscape is completely free and open source. The third thing you're going to need is your personal measurements, or you can use the ASTM measurement tables that come standard with the purchase of every block and pattern. In this tutorial, you will learn how to turn a sloper into a final finished sewing pattern. You're going to learn some keyboard shortcuts for Adobe Illustrator and some workflow tips. And finally, you're going to learn how to add seam allowance to your pattern using Adobe Illustrator. An important thing to note, I may use certain design liberties and choices, but feel free when you design your asymmetrical bralette top to go wild and make different design choices and really let your creativity run wild. Okay, let's get drafting. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is head on over to MiSlope.com. We're gonna head into the MiSlope drafting library and we're gonna scroll down until we find the One-Piece Dartless Sloper. And then we're going to log in. If you haven't already purchased the MiSlope Dartless Sloper, you can do that and then skip back to this step. Okay, awesome. So now that we're logged in, you're gonna need to know your personal measurements, or you could follow along with the measurement table in this tab here. A note, I'm going to be inputting my bust radius measurement. It's not a required measurement, but it's going to be a helpful guide when you start drafting. So make sure you have that measurement on hand. And I will be drafting in inches today. Awesome. So once you've inputted your measurements and downloaded your sloper, you're ready to go. Save it off to the side and we're gonna open it up in Adobe Illustrator. Once we're in Adobe Illustrator, we're gonna create a larger workspace to work in so we have more space to play. So how we're gonna do that is we're gonna go File, New, and I like to work in a relatively large workspace, so around 227 inches by 227 inches, and we're gonna create. Now we're gonna grab our sloper. So we can either take our cursor and just drag it on over, or we can do Command A and then Command C on a Mac and bring it over into our workspace and Command V it. So I'm gonna move the logo out of the way or just delete it. I'm gonna delete the website and then I'm going to keep my measurements and my inch square and just move it off to the side. Now the next thing we wanna do is create a new layer for our guidelines. And we're going to lock that base layer. The first guideline are side seam lengths. For the design that I'm going to draft, I'm going to have the underbust seam hit under bust. So I have my bust radius here to serve as a guide, and it will show approximately where the underbust will hit. I'm going to take my underbust and I'm going to draw in a guideline. I'm going to do it in red. And I'm going to make it a little bit thicker. So I'm going to make my stroke around 0.03 inches just so I can see everything. I'm going to go just 2 inches from my apex point. Now we need to match up our side seams. The center front is pretty simple and straightforward. You're going to just extend this line to your side seam and it is already hitting center front perpendicularly, so you're good to go there. The trickier seam, which will be your side seam, from the bust line to the underbust line, we want it to extend 2 inches. Okay, so our line is in two separate forms. So first we're going to cut at the bust line. So just the C key, we're going to cut it. And these are two separate lines, so we're just going to select both. So we're going to click our A key, click and drag, and then we're going to do Command J on a Mac to join the lines together. And then highlight the line, press C on our keyboard, and we're going to cut and then look at our object document. It fell on the side, 1.28. Press Command Z to undo. Cut it again, Command Z undo. Cut. We're getting closer, so 2.29, cut, 2.18, cut, 2.07, cut, 2.03, cut, 2.002. And then we're going to select that line, and then we're going to change the color. Or we can use our eyedropper tool to just grab the line in formatting in the center. And then we're good to go. Just create our guideline here, 0.25, press R in the keyboard, line it up, shift to 90 degrees, and then we're going to connect our two lines, Bezier curve lined up, and we always want to make sure that when we're drawing lines onto our side seam, you want to make sure that you're drawing your lines at 90 degrees so your pattern pieces fit together perfectly. And there we have it. That is going to be our front piece that we're going to work with. Now we have to work with our back piece. So remember, we're extending 2 inches from below the bust line. We have to mirror the same thing on our back piece. So we're going to take the backslash key and we're going to input the line at the bust line, 2 inches. There's our line. We're going to press R, and then we're going to click the end of the line, so right here. And then we're going to drag our line until it aligns with our side seam. Good to go. Now we're going to do the same thing with our tiny guideline that's going to align our perpendicular curve. So we're going to do a tiny line like 0.2. We're going to zoom in. You do a longer line for better control. All right, so I've aligned it, and I'm just gonna pull it out 45, 90. And now our center back seam, pretty simple, it's just 2 inches. So we're gonna go 2 inches down. And then once again, we're gonna do a little guideline. I'm gonna go 1/4 of an inch. Then we're gonna pull it out 90 degrees. Now we need to connect this line to this line using a Bezier curve. So we're gonna go P. We're going to click on that endpoint, make sure it's not here, it's lined up 90 degrees with our guide. And then we're going to connect it and make sure we're not here. We're going to click and drag. And now we have our back guideline ready to go. So we're going to go back to our layers. We're going to lock our guidelines, and we're going to unlock our base layer. So that will only select our block. So we want to cut these lines below the bust line, below our guidelines. We're going to click and drag. Click A on the keyboard to get our cursor, select all cursor. We're going to click and drag, and then we're going to click C on the keyboard to get our cut tool, and then we're going to simply cut. So that's going to cut our line, and then we're going to click A again to click off it, and then backspace to delete that line. Now we're going to unlock our guideline layer. I'm just going to delete this extra line, this extra guideline. I don't need it anymore. I'm going to click I on the keyboard and then click on the line style that I want to replicate essentially. Now we need to decide our neckline for our bra top. So the first thing we have to do is decide how high we want our neckline to go and how much space above our bust apex we want to create. I want to have my neckline go at least above my bust radius. So 1.76 inches is my bust radius. I want it to go at least 1.76. This is where I want my curve to end. I want neckline to be in line with my bust radius. Now, when we're drafting in our curve, we're going to need to go a little bit higher to account for our Bezier curve. So if I did 1.76, I'm going to double that. That's going to be 3.52. Now, you can make this lower if you want or higher, but you have to make sure that we have to cross the center front at 90 degrees unless you're going a V-neck type style. We're going to press M on the keyboard. We're going to click the top of our guideline. We're going to create a 0.5 by 0.5 inch rectangle as a guide. And we're gonna click R and we're gonna rotate it 45 degrees. Now we're gonna press P and we're gonna pull it down. We're just gonna kind of eyeball it, see what we like. But make sure that when we're drafting our lines, we can't cross our handle. For my side seam, I want my curve to hit the side seam at the bust line because I want a little bit more freedom. I'm gonna lock that Bezier curve, I'm gonna pull my curve down, and then I'm gonna bring it to the side seam. And we're done with our front piece. So now we need to match our back piece. So using the same principles and ensuring that also we need to make sure our side seams match. So I'm gonna make sure that I am hitting the side seam at the same position. So I'm gonna draw in my curve, my guideline. And I'm gonna shift to 90 degrees. And for the back piece, I actually want the back to dip a little bit below the bust line to give a nice aesthetic curve. So I'm gonna take 1/2 inch below the bust line. So that will be my reference point there. So I'm gonna go P and I'm gonna hit shift to make sure that I'm hitting it at 90 degrees. And then I'm going to make sure that I click on my guideline and make sure I'm hitting it at 90 degrees. And there is my back piece. Now we need to decide how the length of our straps. We have to decide where we want our strap to hit on our back piece. I'm gonna look at the seam length and it's about 6.89. I'm gonna have my strap connect to my back piece at 1/3 from center back. 6.89 inches divided by 3, which is equal to 6.89 divided by 3 is equal to roughly 2.3. You can select your line and you can do a little trial and error with the C key. So you can cut your line. Oh, that's not 2.3, and cut it and then select, okay, that's 1.5, and then you can undo and then kind of gauge from there. 2.3, C, 2.1, C, 2.4, C, 2.3. So roughly this is around where I want my back strap to hit, and I'm just going to take the pen tool and then mark that off. Now to find the strap length, we're going to draw a 90 degree from our shoulder. Perfect. And now we're going to select our line and we're gonna pull it around until it lines up with that notch we just created. We're going to cut the line so that way it is the perfect length from our shoulder to the back piece. And then we're gonna click on the line and record the measurement. So we have 7.55 inches, 7.55 inches on the back piece. We're gonna do the same thing on the front piece. So I wanna make sure that I'm hitting exactly that point. So I'm gonna cut my line. Okay, so then we're gonna click on this line and record the measurement. It's 3.97. Now what we need to do is we need to add these two numbers together. Plus 3.97, 11.52 inches. And then we're going to apply a reduction ratio depending on how thick your straps are, but I'm going to be going with a thinner strap. So if you're working with straps that are dipping below 1 inch in width, I would start applying a reduction ratio equivalent to the reduction ratio you used with your fabric. So 1.52 inches, I used a 12% reduction. I'm going to multiply it by 12% or 0.88. So 1 minus 0.12 is 0.88. Then that will be my total strap length that I'm going to need, which is 10.14 inches. What you would do is just take your strap length, which was 10.14 inches. That would be your strap length. You would add seam allowance to the ends of it, and that would be how long your strap length would be. And then to accommodate your pattern for inserting straps, let's say you're doing a 0.25 inch strap. So I'm going to create a parallel line 0.25, and then I'm just going to drag it over into my triangle here, and then I'm going to cut the ends of my curve. And then when you add seam allowance, you'll be able to pop in your strap and sew your concealed seam with your strap. Awesome. That covered straps and bralette. Now we need to trace out our pattern. We can just unlock our layer that says final pattern. And then we were going to use our smooth curvature tool. And remember to mark your notch where you're going to insert your back strap. Amazing. That's your pattern. We're done. Now all we need to do is add seam allowance. So the first thing you want to do is think of how you're going to construct your garment. If you're going to be doing the same construction all the way around, let's say fold over elastic, you would probably be adding a similar seam allowance all the way around. So I'm going to first show you how to add seam allowance on all seams. So we would select the entire object and we'd go Object, Path, Offset Path, and then we would add in our seam allowance. So let's say I'm gonna do 0.3 inch, and then I'm just gonna press OK, and then I'm going to get that seam allowance all the way around. So very easy. Let's say we wanted to do a binding, for example, we'd put it on our main seams. This seam, and these seams need seam allowance. So Object, Path, Offset Path, we'll go with 0.3. Now because the path isn't closed, you're going to get these double lines. You can just go in and select them and delete the double lines. An important thing to note is this corner here, for example. It's a bit tricky because this line offset creates this little square here, so we're going to have to continue our line here and then continue our seam allowance and then cut off the excess. So that way we get a clean corner. So that is how we add seam allowance. So for our front piece, I'm just going to mirror it. And there you have it. How to add seam allowance to your pattern piece. And that's it. You've now drafted your own custom sewing pattern using the MiSlope One-Piece Dartless Sloper from MiSlope.com. So if you have any questions or comments, feedback, please leave them down in the comments below. And if you'd like to take MiSlope for a trial run, we do have a free tool, the MiSlope Custom Circle Skirt tool. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this video and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another tutorial. MiSlope, making stretch fashion design accessible to everyone.